What is your favorite part of working for the CIA? What was your least favorite part? And then did that give you a taste of venture capital that you liked, or something that you were like, oh man, this needs to be drastically different? I'm not interested
Oh
in
my
this.
God. So,
Disclaimer number 1, guests and hosts drink on this show, and we ask that if you join us, you be of legal age and you drink responsibly. Number 2, if you want to know about check size, stage, similar questions, this is the wrong podcast for you. On Drinks with a VC, we're all about digging a little bit deeper and getting to know the person behind the investment decisions.
Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Drinks with a VC. Thanks for tuning in via whatever platform you are using. I'm Vik the co-founder and managing director of GreenCow Venture Capital, and I'm joined by my friend and co-hostess with the mostest, Bree Hansen, who leads biz dev for Burkland Associates. Hi, Bree.
Hi, I'm still here, people.
Yes, so we did not waste any time, getting this season into high gear, did we?
Frankly, I don't want to waste any time because we have so much to go into with our next guest.
Absolutely. I am very stoked about our next guest. He just has a crazy story, from bagging groceries at Kroger's in Detroit to getting an MBA from Stanford and working at CIA's Corporate Venture Capital Fund, to starting his own mobile gaming company. You'd be really hard pressed to find a career more diversified than our next guest. I've had the pleasure of knowing him actually since he started the Virtual Good Summit and the Social Gaming Summit. And I've watched his career really take off in venture, first as a partner at Softtech VC, now called Uncork, and now as the founder of one of the most prevalent pre-seed funds out there, Precursor Ventures. Welcome to the show, the pride of Cranbrook Kingswood High School, Charles Hudson.
wow, that's the best intro I've ever had. Maybe we should just stop now. It can only go downhill from here.
It only goes downhill. We've got that a lot. I gotta tell you, I just think we have some very impressive people that make our job of introing them very easy. I don't know.
That's true. I think so. You are impressive people. And Charles, you are very impressive. We're really happy to have you on here. What did you choose as your drink of choice tonight?
I went with a Manhattan, and there were some orange bitters that I had, which thank you for sending. And they really kicked it up a notch. I have to say, it was eye-opening. So I made a rye Manhattan with orange bitters. I think I underestimated how quickly I would go through it, but it's quite tasty.
So prior to Charles, you coming onto the show, we actually had one of the most active VCs on Twitter. Do you know Sheil Minot by any chance?
Of course I know Sheil Minot. Who doesn't know Sheil Minot?
Who doesn't? And because he's all over the freaking world, and he's all over Twitter, he's all over Clubhouse, all of these things.
Twitch.
Justin Bieber videos, all of that. And you are less active by that standard, but you also use social media more so to promote others and to promote your portfolio companies. But I don't think that means that you are any less popular. And I wanted to share two tidbits with you, and then I want to get your reaction to them. Okay. The first tidbit, I was on a community Zoom call, Bree, and it was put on by an LP of ours and yours, I believe, First Close Partners. And by the way, shout out to Ed, Betsy, Josh, Teresia, Regina. They're amazing. They're massive supporters of ours. And by the way, if you're an underrepresented emerging manager out there, they should really be your first call, to be an LP in your fund. Anyway, so I'm on this Zoom call with an amazing group of 50 plus bright, impressive individual investors. And then Charles
pops on for his contributions on the panel. And there's this like whoosh of excitement, and people are high-fiving and commenting on the call in the Zoom chat. And it is clear that, Charles is the celebrity in the room. And everyone has a Charles Hudson story. And invariably they're saying things like, Charles helped me with blah, 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 or got to this point. And then the second tidbit is that we were doing research ahead of the show, and we came across a podcast that you recently taped with Brian Holland, and he titled it "The Godfather of Pre-Seed Investing: A Conversation with Charles Hudson of Precursor Ventures." By the way, for all of you looking for another podcast to listen to, Brian's The Road Untraveled is fantastic. But going back to that, what is your reaction to both of those things?
I feel really uncomfortable. I mean, look, I'm really focused on trying to make the world easier and better for other people. Precursor was by no means an easy fund to raise, even though I had like tons of structural advantages. I went to like one of the VC schools twice, Stanford. I'd already been a partner at a VC fund. I knew a bunch of LPs, and it was still very difficult. I wish there'd been a first close partners when I did Precursor. It would have made a huge difference in my fundraise. And I still am close enough to starting Precursor that I remember what it felt like when he was getting started. And I don't want everyone, I think there's some people who are just like, I paid my dues. It was hard for me, so I want it to be hard for you. I'm not one of those people. I was like, it was hard for me and I hated it. I don't want that for anybody. I want to help people have an easier time getting their funds off the ground. So I try to help as many people as I can. And sometimes people just need encouragement. Honestly, Vic, I catch somebody and they're down and they're feeling like maybe I should quit. And I'm just like, I was there too. You got to keep going. And like, you'll get through this. Sometimes people are just like, can you give me 1 or 2 LP leads? Because like my well's a little dry. Can you look at my deck and give me some feedback on the deck? And so I don't know. I feel like so many people helped me get started with Precursor, and like they didn't have to. I think they did it out of a sense of like pay it forward and like helping the next generation. And I definitely feel the same way about emerging managers, because emerging managers are kind of almost by definition the future of venture capital. Most venture firms don't survive generational transfer. So
yeah. So, I mean, I think I know what your answer is going to be to this, but, truthfully, are you more proud when you look back? Are you going to be more proud of the Godfather title, to be, considered one of the best in pre-seed, the GOAT in pre-seed, or, the fact that so many people owe a part of their success or contribute, directly say, Charles was a part of my success, and his mentorship and his direct helped us.
Yeah, I think the latter, the helping people. Because look, I think there's 2 people who I consider the godfathers of pre-seed, and that's Tim Connors at Pivot North and Manu Kumar. I think collectively they tweet 5 times a year. I'm a little tongue in cheek, but like they're very low key about what they do. They are not seeking the spotlight. And so whenever someone says, you're the godfather, I'm like, actually Manu did this better than I did earlier than I've done it. I hope to someday get to the point where we have a portfolio like his. And same thing for Tim Connors. And those 2 gentlemen they don't seek the spotlight. They don't seek recognition. They just do the work. And so I always feel like it's important for me to recognize the people that I think were doing it before I was. And like without those 2 gentlemen, I don't know if I would have had the inspiration to do Precursor.
Sure. There's such a persona and mystique around the celebrities of venture capital nowadays. We always ask a questionnaire. We ask you to fill out a questionnaire prior to coming on the show. And one of our questions is sort of around what is the most misunderstood thing about you? You said, great question, ! Didn't answer it. Just kind of thinking through that, what is the most misunderstood thing about you?
I said great question, hoping you wouldn't ask me because I don't have a great answer. I should have known better with this audience. I think it's really funny. I think a lot of people I talk to are like, what you do seems so hard. You're picking these people that don't have traction and don't have revenue. A lot of my favorite co-investors, like, I couldn't do what you do. You pick these people from scratch. Isn't it hard? I'm like, I think it's the easiest thing in the world. Because you're just focused on the person and the quality of their idea and your sort of subjective reaction to them as an individual. It's not like I'm combing through cohort charts or looking at financial projections. It's kind of like angel investing with leverage. And I think a lot of people think it's hard. And I'm like, for me, it feels easy. I meet 20 or 30 teams a year that I know, not instantly, but in fairly short order, that I'm excited about working with them if they'll take our money. And it doesn't seem hard to me. Ironically, growth investing, like combing through spreadsheets and trying to figure out, like, is this data telling me what I think it's telling me? That feels to me way harder than picking people.
Yeah. What happens when you pick the wrong person? Do you take it personally? I always wonder about this, right? Because you can look at the numbers and again, if you're a growth investor, later stage down the road, you're doing DCF, you're analyzing their books, et cetera. But because it is so people oriented and you're a people person, when the person kind of lets you down or if it doesn't work out, how do you kind of work through that disappointment?
I've been doing this for a while and I'm still learning. What I will say is I think there's a couple of different buckets. Sometimes we back somebody, they work incredibly hard. They pursue every angle for the business. And the conclusion is like they just picked a bad market or picked a bad product category. And they didn't fail due to a lack of effort. They failed because the category they were in didn't yield a great company. Or they failed because they were in a category that yielded a great company, but it wasn't their company. Someone else sort of. I don't feel bad about those. I feel bad for those people because, failure hurt emotionally. It hurts for founders. The only time I feel really disappointed is if I feel like the level of effort. It's not about working 100 hours. It's really like, is your startup your focus? Are you really trying to crack the code in the problem? I only get really upset if I feel like the person didn't work hard enough on the idea to figure out if there was a there. And, we do 30 investments a year. And I'd say on average, there's 1 or 2 a year where when it's all said and done, I feel like the effort issue was one of the issues that kept the company from being successful. And I can live with 1 or 2 out of 30.
Yeah.
As a people person, which, I mean, I really can tell that you are one, how much do you attribute to founder ego, and how do you kind of make sure that you're not investing in someone who could become tyrannical as a founder?
Oh, I'm quite certain I've invested in people that are tyrannical as founders. But I also think that there's as an aside, I think there are certain things as a founder where I think it's important to be somewhat authoritarian. Mm-hmm. Because you have a point of view. And I will say this, Bree, I've been doing this off and on for 20 years. I think the biggest change I've seen in founders is 20 years ago, most founders were completely comfortable being somewhere between a dictator and authoritarian on most things in the business. And the common wisdom was that's how you build a good company. You have these very driven, inflexible founders who will basically trample over people to make magic happen. Probably great for the company, not great for the individuals who work there. And I've just seen a sea change in the last probably 5 years of founders being more mindful of bringing people along and including them in the decision-making process, maybe being more democratic. And I think that's generally good, except for the areas where the founders have unique expertise and where their unique expertise is necessary for the company. So we have some companies where it's okay to be borderline tyrannical about product. If you have all the product insights in the company and you have a vision for it, there's no need to delegate that. Just don't pretend that you're not being tyrannical about it.
Sure. So I am always intrigued. You talked about being in venture capital off and on for the last 20 years. I want to go way back because I'm always interested in the road that people take before they get into venture. What was it like growing up in Southfield, Detroit?
Wow. My dad worked for the auto industry. My mom was an attorney. I didn't know anything about venture capital. I didn't know anything about tech. I knew like law. I knew business. And that was it.
Yeah.
And culturally, like I grew up in the northern suburbs of Detroit, and it's a really different demographic profile than the Bay Area. It's basically black people and white people. With a sprinkling, when I grew up at least, with a sprinkling of Asian people. And like that's sort of what I knew growing up.
Yeah.
It was like I lived in this world that was like a mix of black and white people. At the time, Southfield was like just north of Detroit. Elements of it in retrospect were like quasi-rural because like the city hadn't sort of bled north. And I had such a limited view of what was out there. I just knew what people knew in Michigan.
Yeah.
And when I came to Stanford, I was like, oh, there's all this other stuff I've never heard of. Now, the crazy thing is Scott McNeely, the founder of Sun Microsystems, is an alum of Cranbrook Kingswood High School. So even in high school, I had an email address. And I sent a lot of email in high school. Now, most of it was like guys emailing girls in high school.
Yeah.
Sending messages to each other from the library.
Mm-hmm.
But like I grew up sort of with like access to like Sun workstations and like email. And I sort of thought that was normal, that you can like go sit down at a computer and type out a message and send it to someone and they'll get it and they'll write back to you.
Yeah.
And I went to one of these like liberal arts, you read a lot, you write a lot, you argue a lot kind of high schools, like the opposite of STEM. And I thought that's what the world was. Like you just like argued about ideas with other smart people. And then I came to Stanford. I'm like, what's this computer science thing that everybody here seems to be like obsessed with?
Yeah.
And, California has a very different racial demographic than what I grew up with. A very different also like wealth demographic. Because in Michigan, like you have earned wealth from the auto industry.
Sure.
Which is kind of employee wealth. And I got to the Bay Area, I was like, wow, these people, they have a lot of money. And my friend's like, yeah, that person's dad started this company. I'm like, oh, that's why they live in Atherton. Sure. Okay, like I see that. That's a different mode than I grew up with.
Yeah. But I mean, looking back, even before you went to Stanford, I mentioned you were bagging groceries at Kroger's. What did you perceive, what was your dream at that point? What did you want to become? I mean, I grew up around entrepreneurship my whole life. I literally know nothing more than that. I was in Silicon Valley. And so I literally remember sitting in a pool and thinking to myself, oh, I really want to be a venture capitalist one day. I do. I absolutely do. But when you're not exposed to it, minus Scott McNeely, but what were you thinking? Where did you want your path to go at that point?
I wanted to have my own business.
Okay.
So I had a paper route in high school, and like it was a very easy paper route. It's pretty lucrative.
Yeah.
I had a landscaping business where I did people's yards. And it was a cash business. It was a really good business. And I also worked at Kroger bagging groceries. And I quickly realized I was like, I think I like working for myself better. Because I didn't have this vocabulary at 18. I was like, I'd prefer to capture more of the output of my own labor.
Yeah.
And so with my landscaping business, I could make more in 2 days doing that than I could make in a week at Kroger. Yep. And I set my own hours, and I had my own book of clients. And I had this and my mom ran her own law firm. And so she would not describe herself as an entrepreneur, but she used to work for the government, and she left and started her own law firm.
Sure.
And I was like, I kind of think I want to work for myself like my mom does. And my dad worked for one company, Ford Motor Company, then Visteon, basically for his whole life. And I watched my dad work in the corporate world, and he was very successful. But I just remember when I was little, my dad would bring his big briefcase home with all these papers, and he would open his briefcase on the TV table, and he would go through paper memos on the weekend. And I was like, wow, this seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, this idea of working for myself is really attractive. And I need to find a way to make that my long-term plan.
Is that where the curiosity to go to Stanford and come out west came about?
So Stanford was the last school I visited, and I got here, and my mom was like, "Well, what's your criteria for where you want to go to school?" I was like, "I think I'm just going to pick the school where the students seem the happiest." That's probably a pretty good rubric for choosing a school. So, like, no shade to any other schools I visited on the East Coast. I didn't find the students at some of the big East Coast schools were that happy.
Sure.
They were like, "I'm here because this is great for my future." I don't necessarily love being here. There's not a great community, but this was a good decision to make. And I went to Stanford. I'm like, these people are like legitimately happy to be here. They're having like the best time of their life. They're happy. They seem like warm. Even though when I showed up on campus, the person who was supposed to host me had no idea he was supposed to host me. So I ended up sleeping one day in the lobby of one of the dorms. Yeah. And the other day I ended up sleeping on the floor in between a one-room double where these two guys were on up on these beds, and I was sleeping on the floor just praying they wouldn't step on me when they got down in the middle of the night.
They made a hell of a first impression. Yeah.
But they did it smiling.
They were like, everyone I met was like so happy to be there. They're like, the school's great. We love it here. It's not perfect, but like we're really happy to be here. And I remember coming back and telling my parents, I'm like, I'm going to move to California, but don't worry, I'll come back as soon as I'm done with school. East Coast or Chicago, I'll be back. And 25 years later, I'm still here.
Never looked back.
Never looked back. When did you meet your wife? I know that you've been married for 6 years, but I don't know how long that relationship and where it started. Tell us where it started.
So my wife, it's really crazy. So my wife almost came to Stanford to run track, but she didn't. She went to University of Michigan instead. And I was like, think if we gone to school together. I was like, I was a huge loser and a nerd. You would have not have been interested in me. I like just studied and worked all the time. There's no way in which you would have like found me at all interesting. Trust me.
Where did she grow up?
Also in Michigan. You know what's crazy, Vic? We're the same age. We went to 2 private schools that are about less than a mile apart.
Wow.
We're the same age. I didn't meet her till California.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And the crazy thing is, our son's godfather is her best guy friend from college, who also happens to be my cousin's best friend.
Wow.
Weird.
So he basically one day was like, hey, my friend is coming out here. She's going to move to California for work. Her company's moving her out. You should meet her. Yeah. And I kind of dropped the ball and did a good job.
You were like your Stanford hosts, right? You made her sleep
on
the floor in the lobby. She was worried you were going to step on her.
And then someone else reintroduced us later, a guy who lived near her in Atlanta, who played on my high school football team. And then I can tell you, this is like very San Francisco. The first time I met her was downstairs at 25 Lusk.
Wow.
And it almost didn't happen because I had this very, very talented but rigid admin. And my admin was like, he has no time for like 7 months.
Where were you
now,
working?
For every reason, I was working at Uncork.
Uncork, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was like doing some stuff at Uncork, and I also had my own startup. So I was like, I was running my startup, and I was a venture partner at Uncork. I'm like, this place is, and the startup was at 139 Townsend.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is convenient. And for whatever reason, my admin copied me in that email, and I sort of jumped in and was like, hey, I have a board meeting. I could move it around, and like we can meet. And then we met, and like kind of honestly, nothing happened right away. I was like, oh, she's like very good looking, very smart, really nice person. And then we just sort of like, she would like text me sometimes like, hey, me and my girlfriends are going out in San Francisco. You've been here basically forever. Where should we go? And I'm like, oh, this is my friend's bar. Like, I'll text him and like, you all can go here. And then much later, we started dating. And then we got married, and now we have a 4-year-old son.
Now you have a 4-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
So romantic.
Very romantic.
Yeah, Bree, I almost screwed it up. Let's be clear. I definitely almost screwed it up.
I want to hear her tell this story because I feel like that's going to be a better story. No offense to you. I feel like
You're not wrong.
she will tell us, her perspective will naturally just have so much more detail in terms of all the ways that you could have screwed it up, but you barely eked it out.
Exactly.
Like that would be fantastic. By the way, cheers to your wife, Brandy.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Cheers.
Yeah, and I did screw it. I almost screwed it up several other times before we got married, and since then I've tried very hard to not screw it up.
To not screw it up.
Mostly succeeded.
But you're doing a fantastic job thus far.
Wait, what do you like about her? I want to know. I'm a woman.
Okay, yeah.
She's really awesome. So she had a long career in sales. I just think she's a big advocate for our family. She looks out for everybody in her family. She's a great friend. I'm not a great friend to all my friends. I wish I were, but Precursor is sort of this black hole that sucks up all of my life.
Yeah.
My wife is a much better friend to her friends. I really admire that about her. She's really good with people. She's really loving to our son, and she's really funny.
Oh,
in a way I'm definitely not. She's really funny. She has a really funny sense of humor.
That's really good for a man to say that about a woman, because they always say that men don't appreciate women's sense of humor. But I love that you said that about her, and we're going to take this clip and send it to her on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, that's absolutely, we should.
I need all the help I can get, Bree, so thank you.
Well, it's funny because I actually, when I met Laura, she was very extroverted and she was the same kind of brightness and energy that she brings to a room is something that attracted me to her, and her sense of humor, all of these things. And I feel like I've been very lucky because she lets me do my thing with GreenCow, and it's not easy kind of running this fund, and she does take care of a lot of the relationships and our kind of core a lot more so than I do, which is I'm very thankful for.
It's crazy. So when I started Precursor, I kind of had the idea. And at Uncork, we had raised a fund fairly recently. And I went to my wife. I was like, I have this idea for this other fund. It's probably not great timing to do this because we just closed the new fund. And maybe I should do one more fund cycle before I go out and do this. And she was like, you already want to do Precursor. I just see the companies you get excited about. She's like, you already want to do this. And so I don't know how you're going to be good at your job if you don't go do this. And I was like, look, it's going to put a lot of stress on our family. I'm going to have I'm going to go from having a good salary and some money to no money for 2 years, which is really 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's going to be really hard. And she's like, I want you to be happy. I think this is what you're supposed to do. I'm totally supportive. And she's like, I want you to go do it. She's like, you have to decide when, but I want you to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me because I think otherwise I would have just gone through the rest of Fund 4 and made the decision to do Precursor later. And I think honestly that year was really crucial because that was the year when people went from Precursor is the backwater adverse selection, pre-seed and Precursor both is the backwater adverse selection category of seed to wait a minute, there might be something here. And I think that year in market made a big difference for the fund. Big difference.
It's strange. We have a very similar I'm clearly behind a little bit, but my wife looked at what I was doing and said, hey, you've got to do this. You have to follow your dream, and she lifted us up, and she became kind of that support function that Brandy was for you back when, which is This is a recurring theme of a lot of our guests, right? How their partners have really given them the support that they need to kind of carry this out, and we're all very fortunate for that.
And Vic, you know it is. Sometimes you take a red eye on Sunday, you go to the East Coast.
Yeah.
You had 12 LP meetings, and you fly back on Friday at midnight, and you're like, "Fuck!" Excuse my language. None of those people are giving me money.
Yeah.
I'm totally exhausted. And I was not available. So my son was born basically a month after I had the final close for Fund One.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm even more of a masochist, right? I decided we're going to start the fund and then we're going to get married 2 months later. So, yeah. So, in retrospect, I probably would have timed it a little bit differently, but at the same time, props to our significant others for giving us that flexibility and the freedom to pursue that.
Totally.
I want to jump to you at Stanford. You had interned at Excite at home, and then you jump into this role as a senior associate for In-Q-Tel, which, for those who don't know, it's the CIA's venture capital arm. What is your favorite part of working for the CIA? What was your least favorite part? And then did that give you a taste of venture capital that you liked, or something that you were like, oh man, this needs to be drastically different? I'm not interested.
Oh my God. So first, let me tell you how I ended up at In-Q-Tel, because it's one of these truly random stories. So when I worked at Excite, the way I ended up working at Excite was there was a guy at the Stanford Coffee House who was posting flyers to work at Excite for a summer intern. I grabbed one of the flyers and emailed my resume, and the guy was like, "You seem great. We need people. You start tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I probably basically never saw that person again. He was nominally my manager, but he was so busy. And remember, Vic, that's why I'm 21. I don't know anything about anything. So I'm sitting in my cube trying to look busy. And fortunately for me, Amy Chang, who's still a friend of mine today, came over and was basically she was like, "You seem like a smart person, but no one is taking care of you. I'm going to adopt you as my mentee." So I started hanging out with Amy. And one day she's like, "So what are you going to do when this is over?" I was like, "I'm going to go back to school for my senior year." She's like, "You should stay here and work. But what do you want to do longer term?" I was like, I think I'm going to either go do the very Stanford things, Bain San Francisco or Goldman New York TMT banking. And if you let me tell a longer story. So I ended up interning at Excite. It was really fun. The people were awesome. I met so many great people that are still friends today. Raj Kapoor, Jeff Donaker. We had Joe Kraus. We had so many awesome people in our group. Mostly through acquisitions and internal hiring. It was a lot of fun to be at Excite. Brett Bullington. And I remember I went to New York and interviewed at Goldman, and I was like, I don't know if this is the right job for me. And the team was like, "You should talk to this MD in our group. He'll set you straight." So I go meet with this guy, Vic. And I go to his office. It's one of those big offices, corner, couch. I sit down with the guy, and he's like, "So they tell me you have some reservations about this job." I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "First off, I don't need you to take this job." He's like, "There's a lot of other smart people, but my team says you're great. What's your biggest reservation?" I'm like, "I don't think you get much of a life in this job. Seems to me all you do is work."
Yeah.
He's like, "I'm not going to BS you like they did. You're going to work a lot, and you're going to make some money. And if you get promoted, you'll make a lot of money. That's the deal here. If you don't want to do that, you totally should not come here." I was like, well, he's like, "I can tell you this because I don't need you specifically to take this job. I need an analyst to fill this role. So I don't want you to take," and he promptly got up and walked out of his own office. And I was like, wow, at least he told me the truth. He didn't dissuade me to thinking, because they were like, "Oh, it's fun. After your 2 a.m. when you're done with the model, you'll go out, hang out with your analyst class." And he was just like, "No, it sucks. You work a lot. It's a lot of work. It's hard." Don't let them glamorize. And I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And so I went back and talked to Amy, and Amy's like, look, my husband, Gilman Louie, is starting this thing. He's like taking over In-Q-Tel. I think he needs some help. I don't know what he needs help with, but it's too much work for him to do by himself.
Sure.
I want you to have breakfast with him and like talk to him.
Yeah.
And I went to him and he was just like, some days you're going to go to Staples. Some days you're going to meet John Doerr. Can't tell you what you're going to do on each day. And he was a two-time Kleiner Batch founder. So he could actually credibly say that.
Yeah.
And I just like went home and told my parents, and they're like, what are you going to do? I'm like, going to In-Q-Tel. And they're like, what? They're like, you're not going to go to Goldman? So ironically, one of the people I was going to work for at Goldman is one of my friends in venture, Nick Beim at Venrock.
Yeah.
Nick would have been the like person I reported to in New York TMT banking. And I told my parents, I was like, I feel like this In-Q-Tel thing will never come around again. I think if I go back to business school, I can maybe get back into the Goldman path. I can maybe get onto the consulting path. The CIA is probably not going to start another venture fund in my lifetime. Sure. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. And they're like, do you think it's a scam? I'm like, possibly. I'm not going to tell you like it's not a scam. It's possibly a scam. And Vic, the day I really thought it was a scam, our first office was the Regis in Foster City, kind of by the Visa complex.
Yeah.
And I like got off this elevator and it was like a bunch of these like little small, I'm like, oh, this is totally a scam. This is like Universal Exports.
100%.
This is totally some James Bond,
yes.
like 100% scam. This is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be one of the best professional experiences I had in my whole life. I worked with amazing people. And to show you how naive I was, one day I went to Gilman. I was like, there's a bunch of VCs who don't know who we are. He's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to make a pitch deck on In-Q-Tel, and I'm going to go pitch a bunch of VCs. He's like, I'm like, I'm going to put my laptop in my bag, and I'm going to go drive around Santa Road. I'm going to go pitch people on In-Q-Tel. Not knowing that VCs don't go pitch other VCs.
Yeah.
And I think because I was so young, they were like, this is hilarious that this like young kid wants to come.
I literally was like, oh, do you guys do that? I've never heard of that practice. But it's a new best practice, a Charles Hudson special.
Yeah.
The hilarious thing was I ended up meeting all of these really senior people at other venture firms who I think were like A, partially curious about like, well, what's In-Q-Tel trying to do? Yeah. And B, they're like, I've never sat through another venture fund. Come in and pitch our venture fund. So like I pitched almost the entire West Coast partnership of Greylock at like 23 years old on In-Q-Tel.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Which is totally ridiculous. But it was like such a great job.
And you and I both got our starts at corporate venture capital funds. I was at SK Telecom, and I remember, needing to build our brand because SK Telecom isn't widely known in the United States. And what they are widely known for doesn't translate. And so I just find that so just smart. Like I didn't do that. I really should have. I tried to build our brand the right way and I tried to do it, but I should have gone the Charles Hudson route of pitch everybody, pitch people that don't even know why you're pitching them and roll with it because you just meet people.
I was just so naive, Vic. And like also we had this other context with In-Q-Tel, which was because we were a quasi-government agency, we never wanted to say, oh, we only talk to VC firms on the coast. There could be a great venture firm in Tennessee.
Sure.
And we would never want like the ranking senator from Tennessee to say, why isn't In-Q-Tel looking at companies? And sometimes like the best thing you can do is find the work that no one else wants to do.
Sure.
No one else at In-Q-Tel was going to go on the road and pitch the firm.
Yeah.
It wasn't interesting, but I was like, oh, this seems like a good use of time. Like it's a good way to like build a network.
I mean, again, speaking as an emerging manager, one of the most useful time spent for me is actually pitching other VCs on the value that Maggie and I bring in GreenCow, right? And so I think that translates extremely well. So look, okay, we're moving forward. And in fact, I actually want to jump through Ironport, through you as a BD manager at Google, you joined Gaia Interactive, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a virtual world back when tweens and teens. And then you decided, okay, I'm going to found my own mobile gaming company, Bionic Panda. And this was a couple of months before you joined Uncork. What in the hell made you go from the CIA and securities kind of to mobile gaming and massive multiplayer online social gaming and that whole world?
So I'll tell you a crazy story. So when I was at Google, I went to a conference with my friend David Feinleib. It was just when widgets were a big thing. I'm dating myself. Widgets, web widgets.
Widgets.
Oh, widgets, God. I know, right?
Yeah.
And I was at this conference. I was like, this conference was bad. It was poorly produced. Speakers were not good. And David was like, no offense, you don't know anything about producing a conference. I was like, touche. You're right. I was like, I think I could do better than that. And so he's like, okay. So I called my friend who worked at Stanford. I was like, can you get me a venue on, again, talk about naive. Can you get me a free venue on Stanford any day this summer for a conference? And she was like, no. I was like, try harder.
Yeah.
And she's like, look, we can sponsor your application to have Annenberg. And so the first Virtual Goods Summit was done at Annenberg. When I started that conference, I knew nothing about running an events business.
Sure.
And I pinged my friend Susan Wu. I was like, Susan, I'm going to do this conference. She's like, oh, I'll help you. I'll invite all the people and we'll make it happen. I'm like, but what does that mean? She's like, oh, we'll throw up an Eventbrite page. We'll sell some tickets. We'll market it. So
yeah,
we set up this website. Yeah, so Susan and I set up this website. And the irony is, like, this is before TechCrunch, VentureBeat, and GigaOM had events businesses.
Yeah.
So I just emailed my friend at TechCrunch. I'm like, I'm doing this conference in virtual goods. Would you guys promote it? They're like, yeah, sure. Why not? We're not in that business.
Sure.
So they promoted it, and we had a lot of people show up. So many. And like, I knew nothing about, like, literally the night before that day that event started, I was like at Costco printing programs on paper till like 3 a.m. I grabbed a paid attendee who's still a friend of mine in spite of this. And so I was like, I need you to help me. He's like, I paid to be here. I'm like, I know, but I kind of need you to help me get this thing off the ground.
Sure.
And we had this unbelievable set of people come and speak about virtual goods in the United States for the first time ever. It's Craig Sherman from Gaia. It was David Wallerstein from Tencent. We had like an incredible set of people come and speak. And we finished it and I was like asleep on my feet and everyone's like, this was amazing. When are you going to do this again? I was like, never again. This was awful. Other than the money, it was awful.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I was like, there's some things we could do here to make this less painful. And so that's how the Virtual Goods Summit got started, kind of as like a lark.
Yeah.
And through that, I met Craig Sherman,
yeah,
who was then the CEO of Gaia, who's now a partner at Meritech, who's done ridiculously well for himself with Roblox and a bunch of other companies.
Yeah.
And of all the speakers I invited, Craig was the one person who's like, I'd like to get to know you. So I was like doing this business on the side when I was at Google. And one day Craig was just like, I think you should come work at Gaia. Google, like, if you can do this on the side at Google, like, I think you'll have more fun at Gaia. I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, let's come work at Gaia. So I came to Gaia and it was super fun.
Yeah.
And that was my first time. I was like, oh, startups are my thing. There's like 40 of us at the time here trying to figure out these really hard problems. And this is so energizing and so fun.
Yeah.
I really like this. This is so much more fun than Google. I was like, I'm going to make probably less money and work more hours.
Yeah.
But I'm like so much more energized because our BD and sales team was 2 people when I started.
Yeah.
It was me and Joe Herkin. Well, it was Joe Herkin that I joined him. And then we added like Susan Kuo, who's now the CEO of Singular. Like, the team ended up being great. And through Gaia, I met so many amazing people. I was like, oh, this is part of what happens when you work at a startup.
Mm.
You meet these amazing people. And if you stay for 2 or 3 years, you kind of really get to know them.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I hope Craig won't be upset with me telling this story. One day I was in the parking lot of Gaia. We were trying to figure out what to do about the web and Facebook. Craig calls me and he says, I just heard from someone that Zynga is making a crazy amount of money on poker. Do you think it's possible? Poker and Facebook. I was like, I don't think it's possible. I know a lot about social games. That level of monetization, I actually don't believe is. I think someone's like selling you a bill of goods.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, it seemed weird to me. He's like, yeah, I was wrong.
Yeah.
100% I was wrong.
Yeah.
It was that good. And so I left Gaia and went to go work at this company, Serious Business, that was started by Alex Lay and Siki Chen.
Yeah.
And again, like had an amazing time there. And we sold that business to Zynga. And I was in that awkward tier of people that was not a founder, but not an IC.
Sure.
And there was just nothing for me to do with Zynga.
Yeah.
And so I called my buddy who ran engineering at Serious Business. And in 2010, we tried to build an Android-only games company. We probably started it, 10 years too early.
Yeah. Was this before like the burst of the app economy?
No, the iOS App Store was working.
It was working.
iOS had IAP. But when we started Bionic Panda, the Google Play Store didn't have integrated payments.
Okay.
We were getting paid through PayPal.
Got it.
In retrospect, I'm surprised we made as much money as we did.
Yeah.
Given the friction.
Sure.
But our bet was like, well, Google has to catch up soon because they're Google.
Yeah.
And someday, Vic, was the right answer, not soon.
Yeah. So both you and I actually had experiences, both Cyworld, which was SK Telecom's property, and social media, which had 98% penetration before Facebook really kind of came in. And you clearly had your experiences with Gaia and Bionic Panda. When you look at social gaming and you look at social web generally, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's TikTok or Clubhouse or Facebook and Instagram, when I look back on it, it's hard not to understand and see kind of, okay, behind the curtain, I know exactly what kind of levers people are trying to pull, etc. You have a kid. I don't have a kid. You have a 4-year-old who clearly probably, if he's anything like all the other kids that I know that are the same age, it's like they're picking up technology faster.
Yeah.
They're learning the ins and outs of how things work, etc. Have you thought about what it's going to be like when he gets on social media and participates in social gaming, and like what is your stance on him playing those games in the future and using those platforms?
We let him do YouTube Kids because that feels it's a contained environment, and we supervise him. He loves Khan Academy.
Wow.
My biggest fear is that, like, generally speaking, the internet brings adult life to you much earlier than you otherwise would expect. And everything, like, without getting too specific, every adult bad and or scary thing is accessible to you kind of in an unfettered fashion at a time when maybe you don't know what to do with what you're seeing or hearing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but I also just think I've met some of my friends' kids who are very skilled at Roblox. They understand the Roblox economy, and they understand like where their time is well spent and where their time is not well spent.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good, like, it's funny. Like, we talk about screen time. I watched a lot of TV growing up. It was like linear TV, but like I watched a lot of TV growing up. I think I turned out okay. So I think it's this balance between like, how do I keep my son from like venturing into like corners of the internet that are just not appropriate for him? But also like my friends and I, we did a lot of stupid stuff when our parents were around growing up. And like that was part of growing up.
Yeah.
It was like we rode our bikes down hills that were too steep, and like we did dumb things and we lived to tell about it. So I don't want to deprive my son of like the joy of exploration. But I think like we live in a world where like the places you can explore are actually much scarier now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last question on this topic. Would you ever go back to founding a company?
Never.
You're
It's
done.
so much harder. It's so much. I stepped in and did interim CEO for one of my portfolio companies from Uncork. I had forgotten how hard it is to be founder and CEO of a company, because all the problems you get are the ones that no one else can solve. And it's not like being founder and CEO. One of my friends was like, I'm Series C. What advice do you have me? I'm like, it never gets better. It just gets different. And I was like, your problems will be different. It's not going to get better.
Yeah.
And I just think like for me, it's the emotional investment required to be a really successful founder. Like, I have a lot of emotional investment in Precursor. There's days I want to tear what little hair I have out when I'm running this place. But we have 3 or 4 employees. And when I realized, it's like, when you're the founder and CEO, you have hundreds of people sometimes whose careers and dreams are like, professionally at least, are like tied to decisions you make.
Yeah.
And like, that's a lot to manage. And as the company gets bigger, you're managing through other people. And I'm just sort of like, running a company is really stressful. Yeah. And it never gets better. And the nice thing about being an investor is sometimes people bring me problems. I'm like, here's what I think. Let me know what you decide to do. Like, it's your decision. You're the founder and CEO. Here's my input. I agree this is a hard problem. I'm happy to talk about it as much as you want, but you have to make the call. And it's like, when you're in a board meeting, you're like, we have to lay off 10% of the people. The people on the board don't have to do it. The CEO has to go back.
Sure.
And look those people in the eye and have those conversations and deal with the dread of doing it the day before and the like drain of doing it the day after. It's hard.
Yeah.
So I have no desire to do that again.
So instead, you put some money into the podcasting equipment that you have here.
Yes.
By the way, for those of you who are just tuning in and can't see this exceptionally handsome man in front of us, he's got perfect lighting. He's dealing with a cold right now and still looks fantastic. He has perfect lighting, great sound. But I know that he takes a lot of himself, and he puts a lot of himself into the companies that he backs. And so I know that you say that, hey, look, founding a company is much more stressful, but that's not to say that you don't feel the stress. And it's not to say that the pandemic hasn't been personally challenging for you too, right? I would love to know, and for the people out there, I want to know kind of what has gotten you through the pandemic. Has it been the Peloton? Like what's driving you through the last year?
I think the hardest thing for me has been the erosion of like any difference between work and home. Like, we had an office in Union Square before. I worked a full day, but when I came home, I didn't have a nice home office. So the incentive to work at home was pretty low.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to see my family and talk to my wife when I came home. But now I'm in my office basically all day, every day. And the 2 things that have helped me, I think one is the Peloton, which I didn't think I'd be into. But I've gotten into it. I like it. The other thing is I really enjoy cooking. And I bought a charcoal smoker. And a charcoal smoker for me is like this like jigsaw puzzle of like figuring out how to make it do the thing you want it to do.
Yeah.
And so I've actually really enjoyed learning how to like I wouldn't say master.
Yeah.
Get a handle on my charcoal smoker. And I cook for my family 5 days a week, most weeks.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, that is so timely. Wouldn't you say, Bree?
I think it is timely.
I think it is timely. Bree, I think it's time for us to start a segment we like to call VC Unboxing. Charles, have you seen previous episodes?
I feel like I should have, but I haven't.
You really should have. Really should have. Also, we just want more listeners. I mean, I think there's everyone in my family and everyone in Bree's family, and then I don't know who else is listening.
I don't think my family listens, but Josh does.
Fair enough.
Like my brother.
Fair. All right. Well, let's open up the gift box labeled C, and there are 2 of them. You only need to open up one, and you're good.
Let's see. Where's my...
By the way, for our audience here, this is really exceptionally difficult for me because Charles is a little bit under the weather, and I know he's trying his hardest to power through his old fashioned. Bree has really left me in the dust. She is
trying to get a drink right now. I'm
she's not doing her part. Okay.
Drink. It's on camera.
Wow. All right.
Whoa. Charles, what do we have?
Wow. We've got... I actually just ran out of these.
Okay. Fantastic.
This is like actually the one I like. These are like Speed Light charcoal lighters. Very nice.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Ooh. Wow. Maple chunks.
Yes.
I cannot wait to use these.
So let's hit pause, not on the recording, but I just want to let you all know that when someone says maple chunks and they don't know what they're talking about, let's back this up and just say that Charles is maniacal about smoking food.
Yeah.
And inside there's like 3 different types of wood for smoking.
Wow.
Plus some smoking paper, some fire
also
starters.
Very millennial. The pink butcher paper. Very right. Very modern.
Very millennial.
Very millennial, very modern.
I feel like it's everything that you need to smoke the next 20 meals for
this is
family.
And cedar planks for salmon.
There you go.
Sure. Must have. Wow.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Thank you.
So let me tell you, I feel like every VC that we've talked to on this show needs a creative outlet. Like they've yearned for a creative outlet. Mm-hmm. Some of them, Bree, are musically inclined. Others like immerse themselves in history and kind of learning more about World War II, whatever it might be. But you have taken your creative mindset. Thanks, Bree. Bree, by the way, has finished her bottle of wine.
Nice.
Taken your creative impulses and turned them to cooking.
I always liked cooking before.
Yeah.
And before, like the challenge was when I was in the office, it was like, how do I get home from the office in time to cook on weekdays?
Yeah.
Unless I like prep way in advance, like the night before. It was just too much to juggle.
Yeah.
And now that I'm here, I'm like, I can prep during the day.
Sure.
It's easy.
And so what is the most, I don't know, what is the most creative thing that you've cooked in the last month? And by the way, happy belated birthday. You celebrated your birthday May 9th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The most creative thing I cooked. Wow. I can tell you the most stressful thing I cooked.
Yes, that works.
Which is my father-in-law came to town and he's like, my daughter tells me your ribs are really good. I'd love to have some ribs. I was like, whoa, I really hadn't planned on that today. This is sort of a last minute thing.
Yeah.
And ribs need time.
They need time, and they were a 7 out of 10. They wasn't my best work, but wasn't my worst work.
Okay.
I'd probably say the most interesting thing I've cooked lately, probably Wagyu surf and turf.
Okay.
Yum.
Probably the best thing I've cooked lately.
What does that entail? So you've got the Wagyu beef, some kind of a steak.
Yep.
And then what kind of surf? Sorry, excuse me. What kind of surf?
Lobster tail.
Okay.
So the thing is, like, during the pandemic, I went heavy on like frozen seafood and meat.
Love it.
And so I was like, that's the other thing that changed the game for me. I was like, everything I want to cook, I have at my house.
Yeah.
I just have to like think a few hours ahead about what I want to cook.
Right.
Sure.
And pull that out.
So what inspires you in the kitchen?
I cook a lot of Italian. I don't think my family is as into it as I am, but I really like Italian food. Also, like, I just like recipes that have, like, I'd say like a medium version of technique.
Okay.
Where there's something about it like I'm going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have like a handful of staples that I just make like every week because they're easy.
Yeah.
And those are?
One is like a salmon, coconut rice, and bok choy. That's one of them.
Wow.
One is chicken thighs and wild rice, and then usually green beans. That's another definitely straight down the middle staple.
First of all, I love cooking, so you're speaking my language. I love cooking salmon and chicken thighs. Those are definitely two I go for. I like to do salmon with some sake now, so it gets that like really nice like blackened kind of ends.
Oh yeah.
And we had a sake tasting at Burkland, and so I used the local sake, Sequoia sake, and there's a jalapeno infused one, and it's amazing for salmon.
Whoa.
Yeah. Wow. I'll get you some.
I can actually
I'll have to try that.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I had said sake from Sequoia that was jalapeno infused for a birthday party last night or over the weekend. That was wonderful. Excellent. We got to get it to Charles.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll get you. And there's also a bourbon infused one. And since we know you like bourbon, we'll have to get you that one as well.
Oh, wow.
They're fun to cook with.
Yeah. So Charles, you're a couple of years older than me. Only a couple. I did the math.
His age is so important on this show.
It's not. I bring this up because I feel like we're in similar life, moments, right? And for me, I've been an avid sports fan for a long time.
Oh man.
I love sports, but I've noticeably dropped off in my love. I still love the Athletics. I still love the Warriors and the Lakers. I still love, the 49ers well, actually, I used to love the 49ers. After the Kaepernick thing, I don't do it anymore. But
yep.
Was it Spencer Turnbull? He threw a no-no for the Detroit Tigers. Right. Yeah. Did you watch the game, or
I did not? It's funny. The only sport I feel like I have time to watch, honestly, is soccer.
Okay.
And a lot of it, I end up watching it on DVR in my office while I'm working.
Interesting. Okay.
I've tried to get my son into soccer from different countries too.
Do you have Fubo? Fubo has a lot
of soccer. There's actually a lot of, we have Dish. There's actually a lot of soccer, and I speak Spanish, so there's actually a lot of on Telemundo. There's actually a lot of soccer on other channels, but I'm thinking I'm like inches from getting Fubo.
Yeah. Look, I got to tell you, as someone who has Fubo, who has NBC Sports, who has just pretty much every package you can possibly get, I am so confused as to why. And
I know.
It's so difficult to keep up. And by the way, for the folks that are just listening, you have to understand, Charles is wearing a Chelsea, soccer club pullover right now. Bree is probably drinking out of a Benfica mug, and I'm wearing proudly my LFC hoodie. I am all about soccer, and I'm just, it's such a pain in the butt to keep up with all of the different areas. Forget about all of the services that you have to sign up for. You grew up in the US like me. We're both avid sports fans. Neither of us spent any time in the UK, from what I know. Maybe you spent time in the UK. I don't think you did. But we both are for these UK English Premier League teams that have crazy intense fan bases. How the heck did you choose Chelsea?
Oh my gosh. It's a really simple story. So I became a Chelsea fan in 2003.
Wow.
At the time, Manchester United was the only team that I feel like most Americans knew. And I was actually living in Spain at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For business school. And I was just like, all right, I can't be a Man U fan because that feels like very lame. Because it's the only team that like Americans know. And the only other team that like the Globe and Mail covered to the same degree, it was when Abramovich bought the team. It was Chelsea. So I was like, all right. Juan Seba Verón, okay, I'm a Chelsea fan.
Oh my God.
And it was like it was like just that arbitrary. I was just like, this is the other team that seems interesting. That was when like Chelsea went on the first of several.
Yeah, Frank
spending
Lampard
sprees.
and
Yeah.
I love you for saying that because 2001, maybe a little bit earlier, 1999, all of my buddies, and I went to Vassar College. I was in an international dorm,
Yep.
and I played squash, which is a very international sport.
Yeah.
All of my buddies were Manchester United fans, and I fucking hated that.
Yep.
And at the time, Michael Owen and my brain is going now because I'm also a little bit tipsy. They
had a great team.
We had a great team, and so I gravitated toward Liverpool, and while everyone else was zigging, I zagged, and I went to Liverpool, and I've been a Liverpool fan my whole life. Is there something that we can infer about that between the both of us in terms of how we pick startups that we invest in, just based on the fact that how we picked, our favorite EPL team?
Good taste.
Taste. Just good taste.
Good taste. Good taste. I don't know. Like, I feel like I love being a Chelsea supporter. I've been to the Bridge a few times for games, and but it's sort of like all of the soccer teams that I like are all kind of random.
Yeah.
Like, I've become a Cruz Azul fan for Liga MX.
Yeah.
Mostly just because I can't be a Club America fan because too many of my friends are Club. So I'm like, all right, I like Cruz Azul, like good player. And so I just end up picking these teams sort of in response to like the dominant narrative, and then I get into them and I end up liking them.
I think one thing can be inferred, and here's the thing. While it's always helpful to be a contrarian if you're going to a side that has good people on it. And if that's something, then maybe that's why Liverpool and Chelsea are sort of both on the top of our list on that front. But it, just like this pandemic has ravaged not only the EPL, Mad Dog in the Fog, which is a Chelsea bar no longer in San Francisco. We've been clinging on to things like the Peloton, which, by the way, Charles, can we get your rider name?
It's just C Hudson 3. It's the most uninspired name ever.
Okay. Everyone listening to our podcast, follow Charles C Hudson 3. As uninspiring as his name is, he's not. And so you have to follow him on Peloton. But besides Peloton, we realized that cooking has been that outlet for you during the pandemic. So with that, we really want you to open up box labeled S.
Box S.
Box S.
Ooh. Ooh. Oh, wow. This is awesome. Wow. That's so cool. Thank you.
And
I don't even know what to get.
You know what? I think that's what.
Actually, that's not true. Actually, I know what I'm going to get.
What are you going to get? So for those of you just listening in, there is a Sur La Table or Tab. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sur La Table. Gift certificate for Charles to spend however he would like. What are you going to get with it?
I broke a Staub baking dish that my wife uses that I need to replace because I use it too. And I've been meaning to go get one, and they have the exact one I'm looking for.
Ooh. Oh, so, perfect.
Okay.
Fantastic. That is perfect.
Love it. Love it. So we're going to start our last segment of the evening. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
And wait, before we get started, I want to ask him a question.
Absolutely.
And it's pertinent to the next subset of questions. Do you know your Myers-Briggs?
I do.
What is yours?
INTJ.
INTJ. Okay, remember that as we go through these questions. I'm looking for maybe some patterns, but that's interesting. You're an INTJ.
Which is a perfect segment. And by the way, Bree is the smarter one of the two of us here. So I have no idea what INTJ or whatever You're gonna have to. I'm also.
Vic's an ENFP.
I'm an ENFP.
I can see that.
She tells me this.
I'm an
disagree with
ENTP. I'm an ENTP.
Yep.
So Charles and I are each other's shadow.
Yep.
Oh man, we're gonna have to have like a whole new after the episode about what that is. I have no idea what that is. Well, anyway, our last segment is called The Giant's Drink, and it's inspired by not only Stephen Colbert and Ender's Game, but it's really a subset of questions from Chuck Klosterman's book entitled Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. And so we are going to give you hypotheticals, and you are going to walk us through your answers to those hypotheticals.
Wow.
This is a lot. Do you get some water, have some, have a sip of the drink, because we're going to need you to buckle in.
And as you're drinking, I'll explain. Chuck Klosterman, he has his 23 questions, and he says if he asks someone these 23 questions, he can know everything he needs to know about a person.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bold.
So we're going to give you some, right? Very bold.
So we're going to give the listeners and us a taste of that in 7 randomly chosen questions from.
We will know like roughly a third of you.
Wow. Okay.
The third of
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's start with number 1. So let us assume that, Charles, you meet a rudimentary magician, and he can do 5 simple tricks. He can pull a rabbit out of his hat. He can make a coin disappear. He can turn the ace of spades into the joker card, and 2 others in a similar vein. These are the only tricks he can learn anymore, and he can only do these 5. However, it turns out that he does these 5 tricks with real magic, not sleight of hand or any of that other stuff. It's not an illusion. So he's legitimately magical, but he's very limited in the scope and influence of his magic.
Yeah.
Would this person be more impressive to you than Albert Einstein?
Wow. No.
No. And why not?
Just because I think my impression of Albert Einstein was his ability to reason things that he didn't understand from sort of scratch was really, really high. Is my impression, at least. And that's like a universal problem-solving skill that's not limited. And the magician can do something that's like truly magical, but in a smaller domain. I think I'd be more impressed by the person who has more range.
I love it. Let's look at the next hypothetical.
You want me to read this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. At long last, someone invents the Dream VCR. This machine allows you to tape an entire evening worth of your own dreams, which you can then watch at your own leisure. However, the inventor of the Dream VCR will allow you to do this and use this device. You agree to a strange caveat. When you watch your dreams, you must do so with your family and your closest friends in the same room. They get to watch your dreams along with you. And if you don't agree to this, you can't use the Dream VCR. Would you still do this?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I strongly, vehemently agree with Charles on this one. I don't want anyone seeing what I dream about.
The subconscious is weird.
It is.
And like it's working out all kinds of things that you might not even know.
Well, you're secretly subconscious as an ENTP, which is mine, so I know how fucked up you are, Charles.
That's right. Yeah, I'm like, that stuff should live where it lives.
So I have a question, though. Are you one of those folks, because I am, I can recall vivid dreams. Not all of them, but I can recall some of them. Are you worried about what the wife and the parents might see? Or do you have no idea and you're just kind of like, oh man, the unknown can be interpreted so
no, I've had
ways.
some wild and weird dreams.
Yeah.
That like I'm like, wow, my brain was working overtime, chewing on something, and I guess that's how it manifested. But I just wouldn't have to explain. That thing was not what you thought it was.
Yeah,
exactly.
Fair.
I don't want to explain my journey to you. It's mine.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. All right. Here's our next one. So, defying all expectation, a group of Scottish marine biologists capture a live Loch Ness monster, and in an almost unbelievable coincidence, a bear hunter in the Pacific Northwest shoots a Sasquatch in the thigh, and zoologists can now take this furry monstrosity into captivity. And these events happen on the same afternoon. That evening, however, the president announces he might have, or that he does have, thyroid cancer and will undergo a biopsy later that week. If you are the front page editor of the New York Times, what do you play as the biggest story?
Loch Ness Monster.
The Loch Ness Monster. Okay. Something about Nessie? What is it?
Presidents get ill
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
It'll be just as newsworthy. And I feel like Loch Ness Monster is one of these things that we're like Sasquatch, we're just not really sure it actually exists.
Sure.
And I feel like to me the bar and to me the bar for Nessie feels higher than Sasquatch.
Okay. Yeah, that's a strong. I tend to believe that if Sasquatch is alive, it's just sort of like
it could be like a big bear on its hind legs for all we like.
Yeah, like
we need DNA proof for that.
Yes.
It's a step above like the primitive fish that they just found, right? That like predates dinosaurs. It's a step above that, but it's certainly doable.
I just want to know how Nessie hid for that long.
Yeah,
presumably Nessie's like not small.
No,
and like how did Nessie evade detection of any sort for that long?
Right.
Charles, have you been to the Loch Ness?
I have not. Have you?
I have. And the Loch Ness is literally a colony. There's a colony of bacteria underneath that moves across the lake every 3 hours, giving it that lap that makes it look like there's a monster on top. So that's what the Loch Ness Monster is. It really does exist as a large group of ancient bacteria. So
moving. Yep.
Moving.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I learned at the museum.
And I think now I don't even have to go to the museum. I feel bad about tourism.
Just save me a trip.
Just save me a trip.
The weather's shit, but the whiskey is good.
It's
Charles.
epic, I'm sure.
The whiskey
I'm sure it's epic.
Is great. You will love it. There's a lot of Glenfiddich is there.
Good.
Yeah, Glenfiddich is good.
Yeah.
Glenlivet, lots of good whiskey distilleries. So worth a trip in your life.
All of the Glens.
All of the Glens.
All right.
I love it.
Okay, next one.
Yes,
I'm going to do this one.
Absolutely.
My favorite. This is my favorite question. And the reason we'll get to later after you answer it. You meet a wizard in downtown San Francisco. The wizard tells you he can make you more attractive if you pay him money. When you ask him how this process works, the wizard points to a random person right on the street, maybe somewhere on Market, homeless guy. You look at this random stranger, and the wizard says, I will now make them $1 more attractive. He waves his magic wand. Ostensibly, this person physically does not change at all. However, you can almost tell like this person is more appealing. The tangible difference is invisible to the naked eye, but you can't deny that they are vaguely more sexier, especially because they're homeless. Yeah. This wizard has a weird rule, though. You can only pay him once. You can't keep giving him money until you're satisfied. You can only give him one lump sum up front. How much cash do you give this wizard?
$25.
Yeah, that's standard. Yeah, $25. I've asked this question to many people, and the common answer is $20 to $25.
Really?
Yeah, that is the most common answer. Very basic.
Most people are probably just a bunch of vain people who are like, I'm good looking already. Like, what could possibly be improved?
Well, wait, is that what your mind was thinking? I want to know.
I honestly thought, like, how much money would I pay for an arbitrary improvement?
Yeah.
Without knowing, I was like, something I would not deeply regret.
Yeah.
If it were Imperceptible.
Okay.
I was like $20 to $25. That's an amount of money I would risk.
Wow.
I think too, just observing living in San Francisco, I wear makeup less here. Like I actually would pay him to make me uglier. So I like it's not really a thing here in San Francisco looking the best. But if you live in LA, you might pay him like thousands of dollars.
But I also think like I don't know what $1 million like. I also don't like know what $1 million would do, right? Like what would $1 million?
I don't know. Denzel and his heyday.
Hey, maybe $1 million for that. Yeah, I'd probably pay $1 million for that.
Okay. Yeah. My mind is going all over the place, but I have to ask you, do you think that the young Charles Hudson that went off to Pamplona and the running of the bulls, do you think that Charles Hudson would pay more or less?
Ooh.
Probably more.
Probably more.
There it
that
is.
That person might pay $50, $75.
So like, okay.
Same order of magnitude. Not crazy. Not
crazy. I mean, you're not like giving out like a couple of grand to this wizard.
It's hard for me to know what that would translate into.
What if you were in Spain? If you were in Spain and the wizard was in Spain, you'd give him like $75 to $100 versus San Francisco, $25.
Maybe I'd give him a couple $100 in Spain. It might be interesting just to feel like what it's like to be super good looking in Spain. As a foreigner. That might just be an interesting experiment.
I mean, look, I think my answer would be whatever money would make Laura just entirely enamored with me and forget about all the stupid things that I do.
Good answer.
So
good answer.
That might be $1,000. I don't know. But whatever that is, I'm willing to pay it. Okay. All right.
Good answer, Vic. Good answer.
Thank you.
Honest answer.
Yes, I mean, it's as honest I can get.
I'm going to send that to Laura on Valentine's Day.
Oh boy. I think she's listening in right now. So here's another hypothetical for you. Second to last. Your best friend is taking a nap on the floor of your living room. This is unlike your Stanford days when you visited, right? Suddenly you're faced with a bizarre existential problem that this friend is going to die unless you kick them as hard as you can in the rib cage. But if you don't kick them while they slumber, they will never wake up. However, you can never explain this to your friend. And if you later inform them then that you did save their life by kicking them in the rib cage, they'll die from that. So you have to kick them in the ribs and you can't tell them why. What excuse will you fabricate to explain this attack? Assuming you kick your friend in the ribs.
I would still kick them and I would just tell them I was getting them back for some long-held grudge that I can't get into. Keep them alive.
Do you hold long-standing grudges?
Not really.
What? No.
Lots of other people do, so I think it'd be credible.
Okay.
Fair. I like that's how he thinks about it.
Wow. That is a better answer than I was expecting.
You got to tell them something that will like shut off the conversation.
Sure.
Of course.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I've got this next one.
Okay.
For whatever reason, 2 unauthorized movies are made about your life. The first is an independently released documentary, primarily comprised of interviews of people who know you and bootleg footage from your actual life. So like this podcast right here. Critics are describing this documentary as brutally honest and relentlessly fair. Meanwhile, Columbia TriStar has produced a big budget biopic of your life, casting major Hollywood stars as you and all of your acquaintances. Though the movie is not really based on actual events, screenwriters have taken some liberties, and critics are split on the merits of the film. But audiences love it. It's like IMDb 8.1.
Yeah.
Which film would you be most interested in seeing, and who plays you in the blockbuster?
Definitely the first one.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah,
documentary.
Yeah, definitely.
This podcast makes it.
I definitely would want to know that.
What do you think?
Who'd play me?
Yeah.
In the main. Oh God. I don't know. Can we bring Michael B. Jordan back? Can we bring him back?
Oh, that is a good resurrection.
If I could bring him
back,
just bring him
back? I mean,
can we just bring him back? I like that guy.
Forget playing you. Just bring him back. No, Michael B. Jordan. That's an interesting casting choice.
I mean, what is the pivotal moment? What's the turning point in the documentary of Charles Hudson?
Probably moving to California. I just would like to see what people like. I'm actually would be curious to see what people say.
Yeah,
they're thinking it anyway, so might as well have them say it.
Yeah. When you look back on your career, I know you haven't mentioned it, but what do you want people to say? Like, what is how do you want people to summarize it?
I want them to say, like, he did a really good job and he helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
Those two things, I feel like if you just help people and you don't do a good job as a VC, you don't stay in business. And if you just put up good returns and you don't help people, that would be really unsatisfying to me.
So I hear this pattern of wanting to help people. Where do you think that drive comes from? Where is that? Is that your parents? Is that some influence in your life?
I think probably from my parents. Also, I moved to Michigan, like, not knowing anything about California. And I feel like there's a bunch of people who helped me figure out how this place works. And without that, it would have been really hard to achieve anything, like really difficult.
Well, I speak for Bree a little bit here, but the rest of the folks at Burkland and GreenCow, when I say it was a total pleasure to have
Absolutely.
you on. Honestly, I can't think of a better person to have on to start us out of the gate in season 2 than you, Charles. And just thank you for coming by. Before you go, we have 2 things. Number 1, for participating in that crazy psychoanalyst of you. We have one final VC unboxing, which is labeled V. So please open that up now.
Is that the bag?
It is the bag.
This was the hardest one to keep away from my son.
Is it? Okay. Okay.
This is awesome. I love it.
We got your little Detroit vest because we want you to remember your roots.
Of course. I love it. Thank you so much. That's so kind. This was the hardest one of all the things to keep my son out of. I kept wanting to take all the tissue paper out of the bag. You all are too kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we can't take the Detroit out of the 22-year now San Francisco native, but we wouldn't want to. And we're glad to have you on. As we normally do, we would love for you to take the last 20 seconds to toast us out. And this is your time to mention a charity, your wife, your kid, whatever you want. This is your 20 seconds to promote anything.
Yeah, well, cheers, everybody. I really hope as things reopen, people can give money to the SF Marin Food Bank. It's a really important charity in San Francisco that helps feed a lot of people. And even though the pandemic is coming to an end, hunger isn't. And pre-pandemic, our firm and a bunch of our founders used to volunteer there a couple times a year, packing food in boxes. And it's a nonprofit that I think does excellent work for the community. And so can't recommend giving them money highly enough.
We love it. Again, thank you so much. Charles, to you. Cheers. Bree.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy this episode of Drinks with a VC? Please be sure to hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts.